Director of Open Innovation here, and we're super happy to have you. Great turnout. It's our first meetup of this kind. We're obviously, being an R&D facility, always a little bit more closed up on letting people into our building. So excited to have you, excited to share a little bit of what we do here. I don't know how many and what type of footprint we have. I see some familiar faces, but also a bunch of new ones. So just wanted to give you a bit of an idea of what kind of things we do here. So one of the obviously very exciting topics in mobility right now is this year, autonomous. And for you to understand what key role this location plays for us is, a bit of news here. We will start our own autonomous pilot just down in San Jose in a couple of months from now. And this is really majorly driven out of this office here. So you can see how not only do we work on leading technology, we actually put it also to the test. And of course with the regulatory environment that we have here in California, and then also very innovative cities like San Jose, this makes it possible for a company like Daimler to really put things into production a little bit ahead of before we launch it to our customers. So that's one of the topics that we do here, autonomous, right? Then another big topic for us is our backend infrastructure, making all of these future use cases possible. In order to scale that out, we decided to open up a new office in Seattle just last year, which is by now, I think it's around 80, 90 people that we have there, purely focused on cloud engineering. So you can imagine a lot of genius infrastructure brains working there to work on fine-tuning our cloud offerings for the customers. And that's really a huge investment for us into the future, because without the right cloud capabilities, the right DevOps environments, we won't be able to ship our innovative use cases going forward, right? So that's another little thing we do here. Then, of course, as you know, the automotive industry is moving a lot more into electric. We will have, in all our product segments, we will have an electric offering in the next couple of years. And of course, that also means higher demand on our batteries. We now start investing into that type of technology a lot earlier than we used to in the past. So we have partnerships that are also local, a company called Nano that we just recently invested in, that helps us to identify new materials that we can put into batteries eventually in the future. So again, electrification also a major topic for us here in this location. Now, we don't only look into sort of the next 1 or 2 or 3 years into the future, but we also like to keep our eye on what's on the horizon in order to be well positioned for that. We also invest in topics like quantum computing. I think I see at least one of our researchers even in the room. If you want to talk a little bit about the state of quantum computing, then you have a great resource here in the room. We formulated partnerships with IBM and with Google around this topic. And start really investing in the toolbox and the methods and also in the first use cases already today to be ready when the technology is ready, which may not be for another 5 to 10 years, we'll see. But we are there already here in this location. Now the topic that brings you guys here is something that we also ramped up quite a bit. It's voice, right? Something that Mihai and the team is working on. We have a dedicated team around speech. And we've seen that with the local ecosystem, with guys like you, with local partners, we can really make a difference that scales globally. And the car that you see out there, that's a production model. It runs with the software that Mihai and the whole team has produced. And he'll tell you a little bit more about that today during this meetup session. So again, very happy to have you here. Thanks for coming. And on behalf of MBRDNA, enjoy the evening, and I'll hand over to Artie now, who is...
Thanks everyone for coming tonight. I'm Artie, one of the co-founders and CEO of Dashbot. We're an analytics platform for conversational interfaces, whether it's more text-based like a web-based chatbot or voice like Alexa or Google Home or in your car. How many people out there are building chatbots or Alexa skills? So I thought I'd just walk through a real quick demo of some of the features that we have if you are building any chatbots. So this is actually a live ticker of our site. We're about 3 years old. We processed over 70 billion messages. So we see anywhere from 2 to 3 billion messages a month, which is more than a lot of the underlying messaging platforms themselves. So I'm going to show you just one of our sample chatbots here. This is a Facebook chatbot. It's equivalent to looking at like Fandango through Facebook Messenger. So imagine trying to search for movies via conversation. So some of the metrics are what you think of as traditional analytics, things around your users and sessions, engagement, like time per session or sessions per user, even retention metrics, like what percentage of users come back each day, week, or month. This is just a demo bot. This is just the usual standard table stakes analytics. Where our platform becomes much more interesting is when you actually start looking at the messages themselves. What are people writing into the chatbot or saying to the particular chatbot? So in this case, if I pick one of the messages, when users say hello, we can enter into what we call a message funnel. And what this shows is when users say hello, what was happening in the chatbot beforehand, what happened after, and you can navigate the flow. So the reason why something like this could be useful is, imagine if this was your error message. Obviously in this case it isn't, but if it was, you could see what did users say beforehand that led to that, and then decide whether you want to add support for it or not. Imagine if you built something as basic as a weather skill. You might think people are asking what's the weather, but you quickly find out people are asking, is it hot out, is it raining, should I bring a jacket or an umbrella? There's other ways to ask for that. So rather than have to go through all these individually, you can see here, hello, hi, hey, they're all greetings. We created an algorithm that we call phrase clustering. So if I pull that up here, what this does is it aggregates similar messages together, whether you're using any kind of NLP engine or not. And so in this case, if I was to expand this group, based on our algorithm, we see all these messages as basically the same. They're users asking for help. But in some cases, they're being mapped correctly. I need help is going to the help intent that the developer mapped it to. Other cases, it's hitting the fallback, I don't know, intent. And then in different cases, it's hitting things that are completely unrelated to help. So this helps you identify those mishandled and unhandled intents. So you can go back and retrain your NLP to improve the response effectiveness. And to make this even one step faster, if you just want to know where it's breaking down, we have a report all around those not handled messages, so you can see over time, is your bot getting better at understanding what people are asking and responding correctly? Similarly, these are all the individual messages versus the phrase cluster. So you can see in this case, when this bot gets thank you or some form of thank you, the user's getting, I don't know what you're asking me. We also keep track of all the transcripts because people often want to know more than just the individual messages and the intents and entities. You want to know the context. So you can go in and see the back and forth messaging and get an idea of the context. In this case, it's a Facebook bot, so there's rich messaging. That's why you see the images and cards and all those things. Similarly, to try to speed things up for folks, instead of having to pour through all these, we can just see, we can filter for outliers. Like here's an outlier here. Something's unusual in this conversation versus normal conversations. You can even filter on all those too, like just show me all the outliers. So where did something outside the norm occur? And just a few more things I'll show Jeff on here. A lot of chatbots are making use of intent, so in addition to having what the top intents are, like this case it's a movie request, these are all the things that people ask that map to movie request. We keep track of the entities. So the entities are the parameters. If we said, what's the weather in San Francisco? San Francisco would be the location parameter or entity. We can go in and see all those intent entities and even filter for combinations, like what are the most common, in this case, purchasing a movie ticket. What were the parameters that were passed in? And we could say something like, show me all the ones in, let's say, California, or over here. And we see the most common combinations of those entities too. So it just helps you better understand how people are using this stuff. So in addition to the reports, we have some tools to take action on the data. One of those tools is the audience builder, where you can segment your audience however you like. Like in this case, there's 40,000 users. I can say, show me all the women in the UK who, let's say, looked at the movie. And it filters that list down to about 3,000. So one of the things I can do with this is I can save the segment. Well, first I can download the segment and then use it as lookalike audience campaigns inside something like Facebook. Or I can save the segment, and then with the save segment, you can either send broadcast messages to them. We see retailers do this to try to get people not just back into the chatbot, but back into the store. Or you can filter all the reports based on that. And then one last thing that we came up with recently here is a new way of doing goal tracking. take just a second to load. You can pick any intent that you want to track towards. In this case, it could be a positive or negative type of goal. It could be conversions, purchases. In this case, we're tracking user escalations in this particular chatbot, or containment, depending on what side you're looking at. But it's all based on users hitting the speak to agent intent. So you can see about 55% of users were contained within the chatbot. They weren't escalated to a live agent. We can see what that looks like over time. But what's a little bit more interesting is actually go into the past and see how did someone end up at an escalation. And if you want to get even more detail, we can pull up the previous transcripts and dive into the transcripts to actually see the back and forth there. This is just a very quick overview of some of the features and functionality. And myself and Blondine are here to answer any questions that people have afterwards. But I just want to say thanks everyone for coming, and thanks again for Mercedes for hosting this, and Lisa with Amazon also being part of this. It's going to be a great event tonight. So without further ado, pass it over to you guys.
Everyone hear me? No? Yeah?
I can hear.
Good, sorry. Hey guys, my name is Mihai. I'm a software engineer here at Mercedes-Benz. It's great to see so many of you that joined today. I mean, it's a Monday, right? Who wants to come on Meetup on a Monday? So I want to hear a round of applause for everyone for coming here today. So I'm very passionate about voice, right? I've been watching movies where you interact with systems on voice since I was a kid. Does anyone remember Star Wars or Knight Rider?
I think the microphone isn't working.
Cool. The microphone does not work?
Does not work.
Hello?
It's working.
Now?
It's working,
It's
but
more
it's
louder?
Just better if it's more toward your face.
Do it. Well? Yeah, probably. All right, what about now?
Yeah.
Better? Awesome. So I've been passionate about voice when I was a kid, right? We all saw Star Wars, we all saw Knight Rider, and we all got inspired by that. I think those movies inspire generations, and they will inspire generations to come, right? Today I'm going to be talking about you about a couple things on how can you improve your in-car voice user experience. So let's get started. So what's different about a car, right? A lot of you probably might say that in the car is just another on-the-go experience. And to some extent, you're right. It's pretty much you're getting from point A to point B. But there's a couple of differences. The car is a private space. Once you get in the car, you feel safe, right? You relax, and you have time to kind of take all your thoughts and then focus on the next thing that's coming up. The car is in motion, right, with a predetermined destination. And the main focus is driving. Of course, if you're the driver, then the main thing you have to do is to focus on the road and try not to get distracted by anything that's happening around you. And if you're the passenger, you don't have to pay attention to a road, but you're inherently aware of the situation. Let's take an example. Let's say you notice a difficult traffic situation, right? And you're in a discussion with the driver. All of a sudden, you're going to stop, you're going to wait for that difficult situation to pass, and then you're going to re-engage into your conversation. Because you know in that specific moment, the driver is focusing on the road. Now, how many of you is familiar with this situation, right? How many has a long commute? Okay, a couple people. So you might be stuck in traffic, right? During this time, you're bored, you don't want to be there, you're kind of annoyed about why is this happening to me, I want to leave this place. So it's very easy for you to get distracted. You probably take your phone out and so on. Or you might be in this case, right? In a very intense conversation, probably discussing the latest code review that happened and didn't go that well. So what does this all have to do with voice, right? How can we take advantage and how can we use some of these things to tackle these differences? So I'm going to tell you 3 principles that we found and we kind of look at when designing voices or interfaces. And hopefully by following these 3 things, you're going to enhance your voices or interface in a car. So let's get started. Use context to keep it simple. So we are a meetup that talks about context. I want to challenge that and go one context deeper, right? The car is in many states, right? Our main goal when designing voices or interfaces is to keep things simple, right? This is the main thing that we look at. Don't overcomplicate the situation. But what if the conversation simplicity changes with the context? We as humans can easily adapt, right? We just previously talked about this example. If you're the passenger and talk to the driver and a difficult traffic situation occurs, you will stop and resume. Voice assistance is a bit tricky to do so. But there's a lot of metadata that we have in the car. We know the destination, we know the driver preferences, like the temperature, we know the selected profile, who is talking, outside weather, and so on. So let's look at a couple of examples, how we can use the context to keep things simple. Let's say we're having this car, right? This is the AMG GT 4-door, sorry. It's a really awesome car. And you're driving at 120 miles to the next city to visit your friends. All of a sudden you notice that the weather has changed and you want to check on it to see if the forecast is still valid, or you might need a jacket. The assistant should take this into consideration and compose an answer that is short, concise, and audio-based. You should probably try to avoid anything that's visual or distracting, or any follow-up conversations, just because you know that the driver should be focusing on the road. Differently, if you're the passenger in the parked car and you ask about movies, right? The assistant should probably present a list on the infotainment display. It should ask follow-up questions and be proactive about, do you want to know more about these specific movies, or do you want to purchase a ticket? Now, before we move on, of course, our legal team made an intervention here and said that I cannot say something. So I need to say that please don't drive this car at 120 miles per hour. Unless you're in Germany on the Autobahn, in which case it's really fun and I totally recommend it. Let's move on. All right, number 2, takes advantage of multimodal. In some cases, audio feedback is enough, or audio feedback is just the only thing that you should be doing, right? Depending on the situation that we just talked about in the car that's driving at 120 miles per hour. But there's a lot of dialogues where you could benefit from additional interaction points. There are tens of moving parts and controller parts in modern cars these days. So let's take advantage of these, right? What are these things? You have the infotainment display, you have the interior multi-zone, climate control, you have the seat belts, interior lights, in-cabin sense, the sunroof, and so on. Let's take a look at an example. In this picture, you see a person playing a racing game on the infotainment system. They use the steering wheel, the acceleration, and brake pedal to control the game. On top of that, in order to enhance the experience, the interior lights will change based on the starting signals, right? The seat belt, whenever you crash, is going to fasten. And then the vents will blow cold air in your face, adjust based on the speed that you have in the game. This is awesome. The 5-year-old me will just be like tripping right now and say, oh my god, I want this right now. But what this has to do with voice, right? Let's say that you're in the back of a moving car, and you go to a destination, and you play a storytelling game. They're pretty popular on voice platforms, right? And they're getting better and better. And now all of a sudden your main character wakes up in the middle of a snow desert. It's cold, the air is blowing, and cold air makes it impossible for you to move. This is the best opportunity for you to use the things that we just talked about. Use the seat belts to fasten so that to immobilize the user in the back. Use the vents to blow cold air in space to kind of transcend that experience of a cold environment. And also, to take it even to the next level, use interior lights, change them to blue to kind of convey that environment. But of course, there is a limit. Driver distraction is a thing. You should create experiences that do not cause driver distraction. Doesn't matter how much fun the 5-year-old will have in the back when the window wipers go haywire and the windows in the back go down when on the freeway. I'm pretty sure the driver and the front passengers will not have that much fun. So I just want to ask you to be cautious about the experiences that you're making and to take into consideration driver distraction. All right, last point. Offline capabilities are really important. Cars get sold all around the world. Let's take Mercedes-Benz, for example. Our customers like our cars because of their performance. They like this car specifically, the G-Wagon, because they can take it outdoors in remote areas for off-roading. This doesn't mean they should, suffer on the in-car experience. Let's take a more simple example. You're driving on a Saturday to an empty desert on the way to Burning Man. Any burners in the house? No? Alright. There's no 4G signal, but you would still like to ask the assistant about your route info. The assistant should be capable to answer to some extent on this topic. You should be able to say, how far have I went, how long till the destination. If there's any recommendations that you can make, you should do so. For example, in this case, you could recommend a gas station if you notice that the gas tank will be empty before you will reach your destination. Or why not just change your destination altogether and go to the Star Wars exhibit in Disneyland. So before I close, I'd like to show a summary. Number one, take context into consideration when creating simple responses. This is really important to enhance the usability of your product. Number two, multimodal can create the next level experiences. Of course, please consider driver distraction. And number three, don't forget the offline capabilities. Don't let your customers in the dark. Thank you very much. If you have any questions?
Can you talk a little bit about how your assistant decides when to present information on the screen versus speaking it out loud, and how that changes based on how fast the car is moving?
Sure. So primarily we focus on audio feedback right now for Hey Mercedes. For certain cases, we do have some prompts, like when you're searching for POIs or specific locations. But we're going to add more things as the assistant progresses. And when you have more domains, the experience is going to change as well.
So you said when the driver asks something, you don't want them to be distracted, but if passenger asks something, you want them to entertain? Or so how do you define whether it's a driver or a passenger?
The car has multiple microphones. Currently in the A-Class that you have two microphones in the front, one for the driver, one for the passenger. Once the signal goes in the car, right, we pretty much can tell which person is currently talking. And then based on that, we can offer a different experience.
Yeah, so when it comes to interacting with healthcare issues, so let's say, for a healthcare issue that might be occurring immediately during a driving situation, are there capabilities of using voice to understand the sounds that would be coming out? Because sometimes the sound or typically, different biometrics might interact with the car. Is that something that you guys have been looking into?
I think that's a great topic we just mentioned. Currently, we don't have this capability. Once you experience you need roadside assistant, you would press the emergency button that we have in our cars. That will connect you to one of our pretty much to our call center, and they will assist you in your emergency situation. But I'm happy to talk more after the meetup.
Up here.
So you guys are completely integrated with Alexa as a platform. Does that mean you can only run Jackson and West East Coast Alexa, or are you going to have a wider breadth of experiences?
So the question was that we're completely integrated with Alexa? No. Currently, Hey Mercedes is not based on Alexa. No.
Amazon.
No, it's not Amazon either. We
It's very confusing because I'm here.
Oh, I see. So I have a follow-up question. Who are you integrated with, and what kind of applications are you going to be using in your?
Sure. So for the US market, we use SoundHound with their Homify platform, and for the rest of the world, we use Nuance.
For people that are building auto experiences, how would you recommend that they measure distraction in both a qualitative and quantitative way?
Okay, tricky one. So, you can always run user studies. There are metrics that you can look at, for example, where your eye is paying attention to. And pretty much based on that, we can find if a feature is too distracting. Of course, if someone who's really experienced, like a power user, cannot really focus on the activity of driving because they're distracted by the thing that you offer, that's a pretty good indicator that probably the thing is too distracting. But of course, it's always best to conduct a larger user study to see exactly how that feature deals with it.
So in mobility, there's this concept of ACES, right? So autonomous, connected, electrified, shared. So how do you see voice assistants changing to evolve and to match those concepts?
So I think voice assistants are part of the connected piece. And I think there will be one of the things that I want to see a case where assistants can talk to each other, where Hey Mercedes can talk to Alexa freely and can talk to Google Assistant, right? Customers will have different preferences depending on their context, in the car, in home, on the go, depending on the type of devices that they're using. I don't think it makes sense for all the players to own everything. Everyone has different, limited set of capabilities and time to put into. So I think you'll definitely have some winners in specific markets that will be superior. And then it will be great if all of these can talk to each other. I think to your specific question, we're probably going to be in the connected bracket. At least that's how we say internally.
Let's say I'm in the car and I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old in the back. How do I keep them from changing the destination to McDonald's all the time?
Yeah, that's a good point. There's nothing I can comment on right now, but I promise you there will be something.
So does Hey Mercedes mostly focus on entertainment and directions and things like that? Are there any, does it provide information on how to drive better or other topics?
So currently we focus on use cases in the car. That's our main domain. Navigation, telephony, car controls. But apart from that, we also go a step beyond that. So you can ask Wikipedia questions, personalities, sport events. How's the snow at a popular ski resort in the French Alps. To your specific question, we don't have that capability yet, but I think it's something that's in the backlog, of course. It's a bit more tricky though to tackle, just because there's it's very complex. Like, how do you define driving safely, right? This is something that autonomous driving is trying to solve altogether. So a human currently is certified to train you to, at least in Europe, to kind of give you lessons on how to drive. So I think for a car to do so, it's pretty far-fetched right
now. Like you mentioned, you ask your car for the weather forecast before you drive, and then suddenly when you're driving, the weather changes. Are there any plans that the car tells you, okay, the weather changes, you need an umbrella, for example? Or?
Yeah, I cannot talk about that, sorry.
A question about one more use case. So currently the manual, the instruction manual is a book that's thick. Is it a good idea to convert it to a bot that you could just ask a question how to change oil and it will find you the answer or whatever, anything from the manual?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely something that we're looking at. If you're a customer in Europe, there's an application called Ask Mercedes, which offers a chatbot where you can talk and you can ask information about your manual. It's pretty difficult because some of the answers which that book has have to be very specific, and then they're not suitable for a voice user interface because they're cumbersome. There's a lot of information that you have to transmit, and it's pretty rare that you're going to ask after you buy a $100,000 car, what's my ABS doing? Or, hopefully these things should be pretty extreme right now, so they're not necessarily a main focus for us.
Thanks for the talk. I have a question. Mercedes is OEM creating these voice experiences, and our companies like Amazon, Google, Apple created this voice assistant experience around the tech companies. So what is your view of the things that OEM should do approach differently compared to the tech companies?
Definitely take a look at your core domains, which is navigation, telephony, and car controls, and nail these ones. If you cannot do that, then of course the advantage over the other assistants, it's not that high. So, and also offline capabilities. This is something that I think for a car is essential to, that case that I mentioned, right? This is something that happens all the time when you drive around Europe. You go to patches through the mountains and so on, and you don't have reception at all. So I think to have offline capabilities is very, very important. All right, one more question? A couple.
Right here.
All right.
So I think that most people with smart speakers are used to normal conversation, sometimes triggers the wake word. Is there any special precautions you take in the car context to have a different experience there? It won't as frequently false accept or trigger.
So currently our invocation phrase is "Hey Mercedes." We train it quite a lot with a lot of people and different backgrounds for different accents. We're pretty confident that right now there should not be any false positives that are triggered in the vehicle. Of course, it's always going to be that specific thing, but we're constantly improving this, and with every new software release that we're having in the cars, we're going to have this even better. All right. Thank you very much, guys.
All right, can you guys hear me? Yep. It's okay? I guess I got the good mic. no questions. You don't get any questions. Right? What I'm going to talk about, so as you can see, because I am from Amazon, I work on Alexa Communications. You're probably wondering, they're using sound now, their assistant, why am I here? So one of the reasons I am here is in 2014, I worked on at Amazon for the first time. And one of the reasons I left was someone and I were talking about this question. It was a software engineering manager. She said, why does my in-car voice assistant do such a bad job? Siri's fine on my phone. I just want everything in my car to work just like my phone. Why can't it work like that? And I said, I should work on voice assistants in the car. And so I went and I did that for a couple years. And I have some former colleagues in the crowd that I worked with on Jaguar Land Rover. I also worked at like a car company. But then I went back to Amazon. I'm working back in home. So I've gone back and forth between mobile. I worked on a terrific phone called the Amazon Fire Phone. I worked on mobile. I worked in the car, and I worked at home. So I want to talk a little bit about what is different about those environments. Because this is 2014, right? This was the state of cutting edge, state of the art. This is 2018 J.D. Power report. Okay, so this is what people are asking for now, right? Because what's become state of the art is no longer your phone system, right? Right. So what is the state of the art in voice assistance? At this time, in 2014, it was your phone. It was Siri, generally. Most people didn't have an Android phone or used Google Assistant at that time. This is an app integrated. And this is what we have in 2019. And I put this up here because most people would agree that these are both top voice assistants. And it makes me look like really, I don't know, platform agnostic. So what people perceive as the best voice assistant is actually a home voice assistant. Alexa and Google Assistant far outweigh in terms of rankings, user satisfaction, any of the phone assistants. Maybe they get more volume on the phone, but these have higher CSAT. Okay, so but this is what the use cases are, and thank you, Art, for doing that. You're my source. This is a report from Dashbot from last fall when I first met Arnie at Meetup in San Francisco, and it talks about what the top use cases are in the home. Right, so you're saying I want the best voice assistant, Alexa or Google Home, but this is what people ask for at home. All right, they ask for music. Top use case, they ask for weather, information, Q&A, timers and alarms for setting their, how long they're going to bake cookies or roast a turkey, and then it goes kind of tails off from there. Right, but music you'll see as a top use case in the home. It might be because it was originally called a smart speaker, right? So people think of it as music. Right. This is in the car, and you'll see this is a different list of things that people ask for. They make a phone call, they ask directions, navigation, they send texts. Music is still up there, it's still one of the top things, and then it tails off, asking about restaurants, local search, generally from home music, right? So making a phone call might be the top use case. This is from my consumer adoption report from my voice bot, which is a different from Dashbot. So basically, if you look at these two together, music's in both of these lists, right? So one of the top, not just the top used domains in the home is music. The higher volume it is, the better it's going to work, honestly. These are all data-driven systems, right? You get more data, you have more statistical modeling, we'll put more effort into the design and development, right? So music is going to work very well in the car and the home if you use your home voice assistant. But apparently people aren't asking for weather much in the car because they're probably driving in it. They're not asking like, how long does it take to cook a 14-pound turkey here. How old is Tom Cruise? Because like they're busy. And they're not setting timers for their kitchen appliances either, right? So we already said, in the car, these are the top domains: communication, music, and navigation. Right? And so I just want to talk about like why is that, and why does that mean you have to have different designs? I'm not saying you have to have different assistants, although we do in this case. You know, Alexa is not the voice assistant in the car; they have a custom. But I'm saying that you do have to design differently for those use cases. All right, so the environment is one. Think about the home. The home, I talk to Alexa when I'm on the other end of the house or down the hallway. I can scream and she'll pick it up. It's called far field detection. In the car, it's great because you're at a fixed distance. He's talking about it's either the driver or the passenger to solve your problem with this 6 and 8-year-olds in the back. They don't get microphones. That's generally how the car companies I've seen solve that problem. They don't get input mics. They get output only. But it's a noisier environment, right? Because you're moving and there's wind noise. You might have the AC on, you might have the heat on. The house could be anywhere from quiet to noisy, right? You could have kids doing work. No one could be home, well quiet. Right? So then there's connectivity. In the home, you always have connection, generally speaking. You have Wi-Fi, right? Occasionally Wi-Fi goes down, everyone panics. But in the car, there's mobile and there's nothing occasionally. So offline, right? That'll determine your use cases. What do I want to be able to still do in the car when I have no internet? I still want to be able to, I don't know, change the temperature or roll down the windows, right? I don't care if I have an internet connection because I'm not doing it. I'm talking about a local environment that I'm in. All right, so the noise profile is different. The distance from the microphones. I thought this was going to be so easy when I started designing for my car. I was like, this is brilliant. You're always this close to the microphone. It's like speech recognition is going to work great. And you can only move so much, right, because you're pinned in by a seatbelt. But it turns out, no, it's actually kind of a hard problem because this person is coming in from this direction. There's that microphone he's talking about. You're picking up 2 signals. There's kids screaming in the back, so there's a lot of side speech. And then there's the constant variation. So I used to run these tests where you go from idling to street to 60 miles per hour, and you'd go from like perfect speech recognition to just horrible speech recognition. By the time you hit 60 miles an hour, much less 120 miles an hour, you can't get anything recognized. And then there's whether your hands are free or busy. So when I'm cooking in the kitchen, hands busy similar to hands on the steering wheel. So in that case, it's actually pretty close. But then there's eyes on or off the screen. So we had a question about multimodal. I did a lot of, when I worked on cars, I did a lot of research on glance time. And there's actually, NHTSA, which is the National Highway Safety Traffic Association, have guidelines about how long you're allowed to glance at the screen. You have to design within those guidelines. So if you create something that has a glanceability of 2 seconds or more, you're violating NHTSA guidelines. So you really have to keep in mind when you're putting anything on the screen, someone's going to turn away from it. All right, so this is what determines the different use cases. Whereas if you're in the home, maybe you have to turn around, but you can keep your eyes glued to the screen, right? You don't have to look anywhere else. All right, so in conclusion, this is my only visual slide. I'm not a visual designer, I'm a voice designer. The car use cases and the home use cases are quite different. The point I'm trying to make really is that there was a recent study that came out that I thought was hilarious. It said, people want the same voice assistant in their home as in their car and in their phone. They just all want one voice assistant and they want it to be the same. And I was like, well, of course they do, because you don't want to tell different things, different shopping lists, different contact lists, all that stuff. None of these systems work well together. It's not because they can't, right? It's because Alexa and Google Assistant were designed for the home and are now moving into the car and mobile. The phone was designed to be carried around and then was ported onto the car and doesn't work very well in the home because you're forgetting it somewhere. So it's not that you can't have the same assistants, it's that you have different use cases. And so you have to design for those different use cases depending on what environment you're in. So that's it. All right. I really wanted to answer or ask more questions of you, but I think we were tortured now. I will take questions if people have questions.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Isabel.
Hi. Could you tell us a little bit about the 212 rule that you mentioned?
The what?
212 rule. The 2-second.
Oh, the 2-second rule. Yes, yes. So 12 seconds is the overall length of interaction.
Some really cool
Yeah.
songs.
So there are two, Isabel's pointing out, there's two guidelines. There's two NHTSA guidelines. It's actually 2 seconds is one rule, but the other rule is the total length of interaction. So if you're designing text-to-speech to be read back, you have to keep within this certain limit. So you also have to have very short dialogues in general, which is kind of what you're talking about, which is when you're in the context of a car, you have tighter regulations about what you want to do. So for example, voice gaming. I know Mihai talked about that as a backseat passenger. I think it's a terrible use case for the car. I don't think anyone should be playing voice games in the car. Well, because the primary user of the voice assistants is the driver, generally speaking. Even passengers don't generally. And I don't know why that is. I mean, it's because we have a lot of solo commuters, at least in the US. But I think it's also people feel weird, like yelling at the voice assistant as a passenger. I have an answer to your other question too, about measuring driver distraction. There are some really good studies that I can pull up that show that even total hands-free, depending on the complexity of the interaction, the driver distraction ratings are super high, like for a Siri or Google Assistant. Once you get to like a 3-turn interaction, the distraction, and it's based on like, they did all these elaborate eye movement and like how your brain is working over time. So, and also measuring how well you stay in lane during the driving interaction. So there are some good studies that I can pull up. Because yeah, it's not just your hands can be on the wheel, but if you're having a very complex interaction, it's going to be a problem at too high contact.
I have 2 quick questions. The first one is about what the device itself affords. So the fact that Alexa is better, I would argue, is because it affords less. The people know what it can do. You're in the home. They're not getting the range of things they give with this, which is connected to the entire internet, which makes it much harder. So that's one thing. And the other,
like expectations, lower expectations.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Affords with functional affords and UI. So what can you do with this nonprofit? And the other thing is, I'm wondering if you're seeing more of a shift, or if you're seeing echo and visuals gaining more popularity as people are getting more comfortable and want to go deeper with the voice experience.
A shift in
having visual. You can do more visual than just voice.
Yeah. So I'm sure you know that Echo added the show it's like 2 years ago now, and then Google recently launched the Hub, which is now the Nest Hub. So I think where we're still lacking, we're still evolving, is the true multimodality of the interface. So for example, most Echo interactions are designed primarily for not glancing at a screen. So they're not very, even when you do add a screen, they're not very visually appealing, right? It might give a photo and an attribution and some additional text, or like for weather, it might give some visuals, but it's not additional compelling content that draws you in. It's not like bring you into a video experience, for example, because we don't know whether you're expecting to be on a screen or not, or whether you're even looking at the screen, because you might be treating it as a non-screen device. The difference with the phone, and I did a lot of, like I said, and you see how many people in line are staring at their phone. This is how they look. Great. Everyone, and then they shuffle to the next spot in line. When people interact with echoes, they're looking everywhere. And so you don't, even in the screen devices, you don't know if they're actually looking at the screen or interacting with the screen. Whereas a phone is designed to draw you in at a close distance. Hi, Bobby.
Hello.
I knew you had a question.
So, as an Alexa skill developer, you can design for the Echo, or you can design a multimodal skill. Do you, in the future, see Amazon making more categories for a skill in the car specifically, or a skill on the phone, and having to be certified multiple times in different categories?
That's a good question. So the platform specific in terms of like Alexa skills certification. I don't know if that would happen, but I would say that we work with blueprints. So we've gotten feedback, and I think this is what blueprints stress, is that sometimes it's just too hard to build a skill from scratch. And so I think that Otto actually, being that I'm pointing out there are these very specific use cases in the lesson as well, navigation, communication, and he added in-car controls, which I think is also a top use case, and music, that they were sort of primed for having kind of a blueprint for Otto. I think that would make sense. I don't know how it would apply for the phone. I mean, people, I don't know how they would design for the phone specifically for, because that really then is like an app world, right, where you're interacting with the app. But I think in a multimodal, it is very similar to like a show screen, for example. You guys asked some all the hard questions. Come on, yeah.
Thank you. So my question is, since in the auto space, a lot of people are moving towards like autonomous driving and having more kind of the driving responsibilities to the machine. So how would you think that trend will change people's behavior, interacting with the system?
Yeah, I think that's a huge. I actually focused very much on that. The last company I worked with before I returned to Amazon was working on autonomous driving, and so basically they said, well, everything's going to be autonomous. So the voice assistant, you'll just use your voice assistant on your phone, and then you'll be done. So you don't have to design a custom voice assistant. I don't think that's true. I think the most interesting part about autonomous and manual is actually the handoff between the person and the car. And that introduces like a whole different type of communication where I go from, I need my voice assistant to navigate and talk to me, and then I give over control, right? And they then say something happens, and I'm afraid, right? And I scream, I felt like, getting other information. Maybe I grab back control from autonomy. Maybe there's a shift in how it reassures me that it's doing the right thing. I think it's actually a way more complex and interesting problem for autonomous. Right now, I think this is like a known problem Mercedes is dealing with, and we've all done with a driver-controlled car. And the voice assistant in an autonomous vehicle, or a varying levels of autonomy vehicle, is a more interesting space. How would you, emotion detection, for example, I think can be very key. How comfortable is the person who can gather that from the speech signal? So.
Hi, Lisa. Hi. My question is, so as a user, my problem is not always to look, I'm not just looking to get results, but how to make decision on the results. For example, if I'm looking for restaurants, right? My voice assistant in the car is giving me like 10 results, but how do I filter those results? And the second example would be the weather, for example, is getting 10 degrees, dropping 10 degrees in the next 10 miles or 20 miles. And my car would alarm me, but would it also provide me some options good decision. For example, would it tell me the next Target is 2 miles away from me, do for the stop by, get a jacket or something?
Okay, so what you're talking about is like some really smart predictive behavior. So in the first one, filtering of search results, that's where I think multimodal is helpful. And again, it will depend whether you're idle, sitting in the car, or you're driving. But one thing that I think most voice assistants still don't do very well is personalization. So if you just say, find me a restaurant nearby, or find me a coffee shop nearby, it could just list 11 Starbucks, or it could list Starbucks and artisan, coffee and fills and all these things. And if you had some personalization, some preferences, some tracked behavior that shows, hey, you only go to Starbucks because you're a gold member and you get free drinks, or that you're just a big coffee snob because you grew up in Seattle and you only want to have like high-end artisan coffee, then it would surface the right results for you. I think that is in the fairly near future, actually, to not just do simple searches like say find Mexican, no, the Mexican restaurants, or no, the Chinese restaurants, but the actual preferences, like learned over time. Like I remember I went through this long span of time where every Monday night, for some reason, I was always too tired to cook. I always got Indian takeout, and so eventually the guy learned. I would call and he'd say, "Oh, how do you set my regular takeout order?" That's not that hard for a machine to learn habits, right? And to suggest routines. And so I think that's in the fairly near future. The kind of stuff you're talking about, like temperature changes and suggesting to get a jacket at the next rest stop, I think that's a little further out because it involves sensors or it needs to know your destination and then check the weather at that destination. I'm not saying it's not technically impossible. I just think it's not like high on the same Mercedes roadmap to implement it. The other thing is we looked at like proactive suggestions. I looked at those a lot, and you have to be very careful with being proactive with a voice assistant because you make a lot of suggestions, then it becomes like pop-up windows on a website, right? It's like, or ads, right? Facebook ads or something like that. I see you shopped for makeup. You must want, high heels. No, I don't want high heels. It's really obnoxious. So when you make suggestions, you should be fairly certain that they're good ones. Right? Cool.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.